What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm going to be bringing you the Season 2, Episode 7 review of The Walking Dead, entitled Pretty Much Dead Already. So let me first start off by saying I apologize for the quality of this video. I think it's going to be a little bit darker than normal. That's because I'm not at school right now. I'm at home and I don't have my lamp with me. So the picture quality might be a little bit darker than usual. All right, before I get into this episode review, let me just say spoiler. This is a spoiler warning. If you go past this point, you will be spoiled. You will, if you didn't see the episode, this review is going to tell you some things that happen in the episode that will totally ruin your experience if you haven't seen it already. So just be forewarned. If you go past this point in the video, you will be spoiled. So again, spoiler warning. So now that I've got that out of the way, let me just say that this episode, brilliant. Oh my goodness gracious. Ugh. I mean, I just continue to be excited, continue to be amazed, and continue to be astounded at the quality of the writing. I mean, it's just amazing. 10 out of 10 again on the nerd scale. I mean, The Walking Dead is just like I said before, they are really making this series their own, and it's just amazing what they've done with this series. So again, 10 out of 10 on the nerd scale. This episode was awesome. So let me just remind you guys again that this past episode was the last episode that's gonna come out until 2012, until next year. Um, and I believe it's coming off of hiatus on February 12th. Yeah, February 12th. So that's when it's coming off of hiatus. In the meantime, to sort of, you know, try and give you a little something. I'll try and put out some discussion videos. It'll be something new that I haven't really seen before, discussion videos surrounding TV shows, rather than straight up reviews. But I'll try to, put those things out of there so that you guys won't be completely left in the lurch for, I don't know, it's gonna be like 8 to 10 weeks, something like that. So look out for those discussion videos. As for this review, I'm gonna again sort of combine the summary and the analysis into one big conglomerate because I think that would be easiest for this type of episode. So let's just jump right into it. Um, One of the less important things that happen is that Glenn and Maggie make up. I don't think it's really important in terms of this episode for me to dwell on that too much, but just to let you know that uh, they make up, which is pretty much it. After that, after that, there's this tension between Shane and Lori that develops, which I think it might be interesting in terms of the development of new subplots. And again, spoiler warning, since the Sophia subplot was resolved in this episode, and I'm going to be telling you how that happened. So again, spoiler warning. Just want to make this very clear for you people so that you can't, blame me if you get spoiled by this review. But like I was saying, Shane finds out that Lori's pregnant, and and of course his first impulse is to think about whether or not the baby might be his, and so he confronts Lori about this, and Lori has, well, at least from my initial reaction to Lori's response was that she's a pretty nasty woman, because she tells Shane that, even if the baby is yours, the baby will never be yours. That you won't be the father and that Rick will be the father of the baby. And like I said, I thought that was a pretty nasty response, but then I thought about it a little bit more and I remembered that Shane kind of did, attempt to rape her when he was drunk. Him being drunk doesn't diminish the how traumatic the experience was for Lori, of course. But that is something that happened, and I can kind of understand why Lori would not want Shane to be the father of the baby. So, like I said, this could be an interesting subplot that develops between Rick and Shane, because if Shane really does believe Of course, he has no way of confirming it, at least not in this particular circumstance or situation. But if Shane, believes that the baby is his and is not Rick's, then this would just be another point of tension between these two characters. And I think that might be an interesting storyline that the writers might want to flesh out in later episodes. So just to keep that in mind. Also, and I kind of foreshadowed this in, I believe, my last episode review where I talked about Dale and my suspicions of Dale and why he's a suspect character. And I think that my suspicion was pretty much confirmed in this episode, because Dale does turn out to be quite the manipulator. And I'll sort of explain why I believe that. Um, Dale is an interesting sort of figure, because he doesn't have any overt power. In other words, he doesn't carry the authority that Rick does to be able to command people and to delegate responsibility in order to get things done. And he doesn't command the sort of overt power that Shane commands, insofar as, he has knowledge of guns and he's willing to use them, obviously. So Dale doesn't have that kind of power, but he does have the ability, or at least it's displayed, it's been displayed throughout this series, I think. He does seem to have the ability to want to control people by manipulating them, in particular by manipulating the information that people have access to, and to sort of use his knowledge to sort of try and influence people's decisions. And I think that this is um, quite troublesome in terms of group cohesion, because if he keeps knowledge that other people need in order to act, then basically what happens is he sets up the possibility that people will either act incorrectly, or they won't have the requisite knowledge that's needed for them to act appropriately or to act in a timely fashion. And in particular, there's something that's revealed later on in the episode that I'll get to. But there is that situation where he doesn't come right off and tell the group about the walkers in the barn. He never tells Rick about how Shane, was pointing the gun at him. So those are just two instances of where he's, sort of withheld information and sort of manipulated the knowledge that people have, and um sort of precluded the group's ability to act decisively and to act in a sort of appropriate manner. But what's also interesting about Dale is that he's also a sort of emotional manipulator. And this comes out very clearly in his relationship with Andrea, for example. So Dale starts to realize, or at least he did in the last episode, he starts to realize that there's something going on between Shane and Andrea. And so he lets Andrea know right off the bat that he doesn't like the fact that she has something going with Shane. And he alludes to something by trying to tell Andrea that she shouldn't get involved with Shane because she doesn't know who the real Shane is. And I think he's kind of alluding to the fact that he knows that Shane was pointing the gun at Rick. But it would look rather suspicious if he tells Andrea that now, because she might think, well, why didn't he say something about this sooner? Why is he only revealing this information to me when it involves me, and when it involves him possibly being jealous about my relationship with Shane? Or she might not even believe him because she thinks that he's being jealous over her relationship with Shane. So he can only allude to the fact that Andrea doesn't know the real Shane, but he can't really tell her why he believes that Shane is such a suspect character. And of course, Andrea doesn't really want to, hear what Dale has to say about Shane. And Dale then responds to Andrea by saying, because she doesn't want to hear it, she wants to just walk away from him, and tell try and basically put him in his place, telling him that it's not his business the type of relationship that she develops with Shane is just, basically not his business. And Dale kind of responds to Andrea by saying, you always want to beat me up for being concerned about you. That's all I'm trying to do is, just be concerned with you. And you can clearly see the way he's trying to manipulate Andrea emotionally, because now, he's trying to play the victim. He's trying to make it seem like, he's the good guy and all he wants to do is, protect Andrea, and she's beating him up because, he wants to protect her. And so by playing the victim, he's trying to manipulate her into feeling guilty, and to sort of, influence her decision making, to make her, see things the way he sees things, and to sort of break off the relationship that she's developing with Shane. And so, and that's not the only time that he does that, especially in relation to Andrea, because if you remember in the first season, I believe it was the last episode where, Andrea had made the decision to stay behind at the CDC, and to, allow herself to be killed, basically committing suicide. And Dale manipulates her decision making by saying that, if you stay behind at the CDC, then I'll stay behind, and to sort of, work on her conscience, have her die knowing that, her decision also led to the death of, Dale. So he manipulated her decision in that situation, but he also manipulated Andrea in another way, because if you remember at the beginning of this season, he sort of, took Andrea's gun away from her. And like I said before, that was just, very paternalistic of him to sort of, treat her, like a child, by basically saying, okay, I can't trust you with guns, and so, I'm not going to treat you like the adult you are, but instead I'm going to, take this gun away from you, and sort of manipulate you that way. And now we get to see how he's manipulating Andrea, or at least trying to manipulate Andrea, with regards to the relationship that she's developing with Shane. So again, and like I said before, there's some other stuff that happens in this episode that I won't get into quite right now, that makes me believe that Dale is a suspect character, and that he should be watched very closely. Also, again, there's this sort of motif or running theme of the sort of, um, I guess you could call it an antagonistic relationship. Not antagonistic in terms of, that Rick and Shane don't like each other, but antagonist in terms of, maybe that Rick is the protagonist and Shane is not really an antagonist, but he is sort of an obstacle to the things that Rick wants to do. And so, Shane, of course, provides that counterbalance to the way, Rick views the world and views humanity more generally, and the relationship between one's humanity and one's commitment to ethics. And so that tension sort of comes out and really comes to a climax, really comes to a head in this episode. So Shane, um, well, since we found out that there are walkers in the barn, Shane's response is, we can do one or two things. Either one, we can stay behind, so that we can continue to look for Sophia, or um, we can, but if we do that, then we'll have to kill the walkers in the barn so that the safety and security of the group won't be compromised. Um, and or they could decide to abandon the search for Sophia and just leave the farm, and head on to Fort Benning. But of course, Rick doesn't want to do either of those things. He doesn't want to leave, obviously, because he's committed to searching for Sophia. And like he said in a couple of episodes prior to this, he said that I promised her, I made a commitment to her that I wasn't going to leave her behind, and so I feel obligated. I feel like I have to search for her, no matter what. So obviously he doesn't want to leave the farm and therefore leave Sophia behind. But also, if he does, so he wants to stay on the barn. He wants to stay on the farm, but he also doesn't want to kill the walkers that are in the barn, because he also feels like, this is Herschel's land, and whatever Herschel says goes. And a quote that he uses, "It's not our land. This isn't our land. We can't just do whatever we want with it." And so there's a huge clash that happens because of Rick's decision to not want to kill the walkers in the barn, and to not want to give up the search for Sophia, and his continued belief that he can try and negotiate with Herschel, so that the group of survivors can, stay on the farm basically. But while all of this is sort of going on, or rather within the context of this sort of tension between Rick and Shane, um, Dale decides that in order to stop the possibility of Shane, just doing what he wants to do by opening up the barn and killing all the walkers, this character, like I said, is a suspect character. This guy decides to take it upon himself to steal all of the guns from the group. And of course, this is a bad idea because, not only are there freaking walkers that are, inside the barn, and yeah, the barn may, seem secure, but there is always the possibility that they could somehow get out and attack the group. So the fact that Dale steals the guns is obviously a bad decision because of that, but also because, as I understand it, and as we have been led to believe, the walkers are, swarming the entire area around that farm. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that some walkers, or that a horde of walkers, would just stumble onto the farm by sheer coincidence and attack the group that way. And, if they don't have their guns, or if the guns that they do have are limited, then they won't be able to effectively protect themselves from that sort of uh, basically zombie invasion. So again, Dale, steals the guns and he tries to hide them in the swamps somewhere around the farm. And Shane hunts him down. He tracks him, and there's this, ideological clash that happens between Shane and Dale. And this just confirms the fact that Dale is basically an idiot. So Dale says to Shane, "You think the guns are gonna keep us safe?" And I'm saying to myself, do I believe that the guns are gonna keep these people safe from being attacked and killed by zombies? Let me think about that for a second. Yes. I mean, what the hell is Dale thinking by asking that dumbass question? Like, again, I think, Dale is sort of a foil to Rick in that Dale is a more extreme example of this continued commitment to the way things used to be, and to this sort of, black and white thinking that, um, that these people's humanity consists in them always following, you know this black and white these black and white moral standards, and having this firm commitment to this, closed-minded notion of what constitutes humanity, irrespective of the fact that the world has literally been changed. It's literally been turned upside down. And so I think Dale is, a sort of foil to Rick in that regards, but he's just a more extreme example of this nonsensical, foolish, belief that, these people don't need guns to defend themselves against, flesh-eating zombies. And so I thought it was, real funny when Shane when Dale is in the middle of this, speech about, yeah, at least I can say I have my humanity and all this other nonsense and garbage. And Shane just gets, exasperated, and he says to Dale, shut up. Just shut up and give me the guns. So, I thought that was really funny. Um and then Shane, gets the guns, and he goes back to the farm, and everybody's kind of, huddled around, and he gathers them together and he starts handing out guns. And he says to these people, basically, listen, if we're going to stay on this farm, we can't stay here with walkers in the barn. That's just not a possibility. If you guys want to save Sophia, and if you want to continue the search for Sophia, and if the only way we can do that is by staying on this barn, then we can't stay on the barn and have the I'm sorry, stay on the farm and have walkers in the barn. Um, that's just not going to happen. And I think that um Shane is just absolutely right about this. I mean, and I've said this before, that these people have to take responsibility for the situation that they find themselves in, with respect to how they have to change the decisions that they would normally have in normal circumstances. And this continued, belief that we can have our cake and eat it too, that everything will work out okay, that we can continue to search for Sophia and keep the walkers in the barn. Like, that's just, I mean, that's just a bunch of nonsense. And I think Shane is completely right about this. And again, like I said before in a previous episode review, um it really boils down to this: it doesn't matter if the walkers are dead or alive. I mean, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that these are really people and that they are really alive. Let's just assume that for the sake of argument. It doesn't change the fact that humans or that people have a right to self-defense, and a person has no moral obligation to put themselves in a dangerous situation in order to ensure the safety or security of these zombies. They just don't have that moral obligation. And these, I mean, and it's not just that these are sick people, it's that they're dangerous. It's the fact that they are flesh-eating zombies, and that in order to completely ensure your safety and security, it's necessary for you to kill them. Even if we assume that they're really, live humans, or that they're, still people, which of course that's not true. I mean, and anybody who believes that is just, I mean, honestly, I mean, I hope you don't take offense to this, but if you believe that these zombies are alive, you're just an idiot. I mean, you're just an idiot, or you're just delusional. You just have to be delusional if you believe that. Um, and this is sort of borne out by what happens next, and this is the part where it gets to the spoiler. All right, so this is the third time that I'm telling you this. There is a major spoiler coming. So if you've gotten to this point in the review, and to this point in the episode, I want you to know that if you go past this point, you will be spoiled, and some major things will be revealed to you that will ruin your viewing experience of this seventh episode. So meanwhile, while Shane is getting the group together, handing out guns, he notices that he sees Rick and Herschel, and I forget the other kid's name, the young man who's like 17 or 18 years old who lives with Herschel. Shane sees them, and he notices something odd in the midst of all of this, back and forth between Shane and Lori, and Shane and Dale, and between Glenn and Maggie, Rick Herschel has sort of recruited Rick to sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. But basically, what happens is that since Herschel believes that these zombies or walkers are really humans and really people, and he's committed to not killing them, I forget what you call this thing, but it's like a pole, and at the end it has like a sort of, like a wire or a string hook, and that goes in a loop or a circle, and it allows you to like grab something and kind of yank it. I forget what you call that thing, but anyway, um Herschel has recruited Rick to sort of basically go zombie hunting, I guess. Except that the purpose is that you will take this pole with the loop at the end, put it around the zombie's head, and lead it back to the farm. I know this sounds crazy as hell, but this is what Otis has apparently been doing, and now we see how the zombies have gotten into the barn. So you take this pole with the loop around the end, you put it around a zombie's neck, and you lead them back to the farm so that you can put them into the barn. And so they have two zombies that are hooked this way. Rick has one, and Herschel has another zombie, leading it back to the farm so that they can lock it up in the barn. Shane comes across this, and he sees this, and of course he just goes fucking ballistic. And he looks around at everyone, and he basically says, Do you see this bullshit? Do you see what these people are doing? These are real zombies that these people have that want to kill us, and we're gonna allow them to go out and to hunt zombies and then lead them back to the farm and then lock them up in the barn. And he's just like, this is basically crazy. So basically, what Shane does is he pulls out his gun, and to try and prove to Herschel that these are not living human beings, that they're not really people, he shoots a zombie like, 4 or 5 times in the chest. And he's like, look, I just shot him in the heart. I just shot him in the lung. I just shot him in the chest. And it's still living. It's still moving. It's still alive. He was like, that's not a normal human being. These things are not people, and they're no longer human. And then he basically starts the killing by shooting. So Herschel, like I said, he has a zombie hooked with this sort of pole and loop thingy around the neck, and he shoots the zombie in the head. The zombie drops. Then he goes and opens up the barn, breaks the chain off the barn, and the zombies start, pouring out. And then everybody just starts shooting the zombies, just killing all the walkers that are in the barn. And then what happens is really, really devastating. So after they kill all the walkers, well, apparently, or at least it seems that way, they kill all the walkers that come out of the barn. And so there's this moment of immense tension that we've reached this climax, this boiling point. And then we there's a camera view that's inside the barn but it's looking out at everyone else. And then we see one last walker coming out of the barn. And then it's revealed that this walker is Sophia. So Sophia was apparently attacked by zombies. She was bitten and she reanimated, and the last zombie that comes out of that barn is Sophia. So this has, like I said before, this has major implications for the rest of the series. And I kind of, foreshadowed this as well. I said that if the writers of this series were committed to realism, then the probability that Sophia is still alive is, it has to be practically nil, because she was lost in the woods that we know was overcome with zombie swarms. And so Rick, and I said, but I also said that if it was revealed that Sophia was dead, that it would just be a travesty for that group. And um it would just be a horrible thing, because like I said before, up to this point, um besides the first walker in the very first episode, the one that Rick shoots, we haven't seen the death of a child. And so Sophia comes out of the barn, and Rick, of course, he's the sort of head of the group, and it's basically his responsibility. So he walks up to Sophia and he shoots her in the head. And like I said, this is gonna have major implications for the rest of the series, because um the the first of all, the opening up of the barn, and the coming out of all the walkers that were inside the barn, is like it's powerful symbolism of the fact that these people can no longer live in fantasy land, that they can no longer be delusional about the situation in which they find themselves. And I know it seems kind of ironic or paradoxical to say that they were, delusional before, because they were in, real life threatening situations. But up until this point, it was Rick's position was at least debatable. It was at least debatable that they could stay on the farm with the zombies, and at the same time, have their cake and eat it too, go out and search for Sophia. But now it appears that, they can no longer be under the misconception that they can have their cake and eat it too. And this sort of scene is powerful symbolism of the fact that the group now has to acknowledge the truth. They now have to acknowledge the fact that They have to make real tough ethical decisions, and that they can no longer continue to see the world in this black and white, dichotomy. And it's also powerful symbolism of the fact that now Shane appears to be right. And of course, and let me just say this about Shane again. Again, Shane is not a bastard, and I think this is proven by this episode, because he could have, tried to convince people to leave Sophia behind, but he doesn't. He doesn't do that. What he does is he says, okay, if the group is committed to searching for Sophia, and if we want to, find Sophia, but it's also true that we can't stay on this farm with our by with our safety and security intact unless we can get rid of those walkers in the barn. Then what we need to do is kill all of the walkers in the barn so that we can stay here and continue to look for Sophia. That's what Shane does. And so it looks like now that this is powerful symbolism of the fact that Shane is right, and that his worldview and that his, standpoint of the whole situation, that his perspective is in fact right. But this also means that, like I said before, when I talked about, how Shane and Rick have different conceptions of humanity, different conceptions of what it means to be a human, it also signals or symbolizes the inevitable loss of these people's humanity. It I mean, it really forces you to question what kind of humanity you can have in a situation where even a child like Sophia can be, bitten by zombies, and in a situation where Rick is forced to shoot her in the head, um, to basically, stop her from attacking the rest of the group. And so it is really representative of the fact that the ethical principles that these people espoused in the world before the zombie apocalypse can no longer be adhered to now that, they're in the midst of, a zombie apocalypse. And so, like I said before, I think I really do like the direction in which the writers have taken the show. I mean, they could have ended this differently by, saying that, this is, going to be happy, and that, Sophia will be saved, and, everything will be okay. But I think they did a very mature thing. And they really revealed the darkness of this series by showing that, this isn't all fun and games, and that, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And so I really love their commitment to realism um, in this series, and I hope they keep up the brilliant writing. So other thoughts, just right quick, because I know this is a long video, already past a half hour. um, since the Walking Dead is going to be on hiatus, and it won't be back until February 12th of next year. If you really need your zombie fix, I've got a couple of suggestions for you. So here's a book, World War Z by Max Brooks. It's a bestseller. I don't know if you can see that, but it is a New York Times bestseller. I read this over this last summer, and it was excellent, excellent, excellent. But be forewarned that it's an oral history of the zombie war. And by oral history, Max Brooks literally means an oral history. So, but if you don't like that, that sort of niche genre of oral history, then you can check out Day by Day Armaggedon by an author named J.L. Bourne. You can find his books on Amazon.com. I haven't read those books, so personally, I can't, say if they're good or not. But based on the reviews from Amazon.com, and based on what I've been hearing in multiple forums, the books are very good. The series is not finished though, so you should be forewarned that this series is not finished. But apparently, it's a very good series. And I believe that the omnibus edition of the first and second book was just released, so you don't have to buy, those books separately. You can just buy the omnibus edition from Amazon.com. Also, there's another zombie series by an author, Mira Grant, called Newsflesh. Again, I haven't read this series, so I don't know if it's good or not, but According to the reviews and like I said around the forums, it's a recommended, highly recommended series. So you should check that out. And again, this series is not finished either. Like I said, I'll try and put out some discussion videos during the hiatus. Try and put out at least two or three, so you guys are not completely left in the lurch, fiending for your The Walking Dead fix. But yeah, this is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.